Good morning, sixth grade. We're going to talk about punctuating dialogue. It involves various types of punctuation and something called the dialogue tag. You may have known it as a speaker tag before, but we were going to use the term dialogue tag for this exercise. Before we begin, you're going to want to take notes. So if you don't already have something in front of you, hit pause and go grab something to take notes with. Here we have an excerpt from Gamer Army. Recall the word excerpt means a portion from something, and so this is a portion of dialogue from the book Gamer Army. So you have three different characters speaking, and so what I'm highlighting here in yellow are the dialogue tags, the three different characters. The dialogue tag simply tells who is talking. The dialogue itself is what is in actual quotation marks. So if we take a look at this, all of these are actual dialogue, okay? So you always put quotation marks around the actual part that is being spoken. So we're going to get into the punctuation for this and the different ways that you can create dialogue for your characters. To break this down further, you have the dialogue tag in yellow, and then in red, highlighted are all of the quotation marks that you need to put around the actual words that are spoken. Pay attention to the other punctuation here. You have a period here, and you have a comma here. The period, first of all, is because that sentence stands on its own as something that was said. This second sentence is the one that's attached to a speaker tag, or what we call dialogue tag. And so you always use a comma to separate the dialogue tag from the words that are spoken. And so it's the same thing here. Good thing I never have to dust in my virtual city apartment. The place would be a mess by now, comma, Rogan said. And then he goes on to say something else. It is this comma that we need here to support the words that are said and the actual speaker or dialogue tag. And so notice here you have the dialogue tag in yellow, the quotations are in red again, but instead of having a comma, we have some different punctuation here. And again, this is because the author wants to add emphasis. Normally you would have a comma here, but because they want to add emphasis, they have the question mark and the exclamation mark just to show that she's almost shouting this, like she just can't believe it. And so whatever it is, that punctuation separates the speaking part from the dialogue tag. Okay, so real quick, let's take a review checkpoint. Dialogue right here in red. I know, right? Is what she actually said, the words that were spoken. In green, the dialogue tag tells you who is speaking, or it shows you the speaker in the story. And so pay attention to this. There's a reason why we're reviewing this. It's probably going to show up again, maybe in a bell ringer, maybe somewhere else. Continue watching. And here we arrive at the rules for punctuating dialogue. Okay, this is where you're going to want to take some notes. So, rule 1, let's go through it, pause, and make sure you have it in your notes. Rule 1 is use quotation marks and commas. Very basic. So, surround the dialogue or speaking part with quotation marks and end it with a comma before the last quote mark. End with a dialogue tag to identify the speaker. Of course, the only exception would be something like this, where you have a question mark. Okay, but typically if they're just it's a normal speaking part, you're going to end with a comma to separate what's actually said from the dialogue tag. Rule number 2, always create a new paragraph line for new speakers. So when you have a new speaker, you should create that new paragraph line. An example of the wrong way to do it would be right here. The place would be a mess by now, Rogan said. You're going to get in trouble, Takashi said. You cannot smash these up against each other like that. It's too confusing for your reader. Okay, down here, this is the example of the proper usage. The place would be a mess by now, Rogan said. You're going to get in trouble, Takashi said. That line separation really helps your reader see and distinguish between the different speakers. Rule number 3, put periods inside quotation marks without using a dialogue tag. This is a big one. I see this happen a lot of times where students don't pay attention to this rule. First of all, if you have a dialogue tag, you go ahead and put the comma right there. Okay, no problem. What we're talking about is whenever you are without a dialogue tag. You cannot put that period outside of the quotation marks. It always goes inside right here. So this is a big no-no. Rule number 4, know how to punctuate dialogue in reverse. In many of our examples so far, we put the dialogue tag at the end. And typically when students write a story, this is how they will usually do it. However, the dialogue tag and the speaker's actions can come before the dialogue. And when this happens, you simply end the dialogue with a period and use a comma after the dialogue tag. So the first example, Rogan said, comma, tells what he actually said and ends with a period and then the final quote. Same with the next one. Takashi closed his eyes and whispered, comma, you're going to get in trouble, period, and the final quote. And so the key point here is that the comma separates the dialogue tag from the dialogue. Whether the tag is in the beginning, the end, doesn't matter. The comma is used to separate it. Another big rule. Rule number 5, begin a direct quote with a capital letter. So take a look at the examples below and notice that when Rogan begins speaking, the word the is capitalized, and the same applies to Takashi. When he begins speaking, the word your is capitalized. And so you'll notice obviously the speaker tag or the dialogue tag is here in the beginning, just like this one. But this begins the actual speaking part. And so we always capitalize that. And here we are at the final rule we're going to talk about today. Rule number 6. When using split dialogue, the second part of the quotation begins with a lowercase letter. So when an expression identifying the speaker interrupts a quoted sentence, the second part of the quotation begins that lowercase letter. So I've highlighted the dialogue tags for you in yellow. Let's take a look at the first one. The place would be messy by now, comma, Rogan said, but I don't like dusting anyway. So basically what's happened is we've taken what he said and right in the middle we've dropped a dialogue tag, but it's still one sentence that he's saying at the same time, which is why this word right here is not capitalized. Okay, same with the second one. I told you yesterday, Takashi closed his eyes and whispered, that you're going to get in trouble. The entire speaking part is spoken at one time and is really part of one sentence. So again, we are not going to capitalize that second part when the dialogue tag has just been dropped right in the middle of it. And so we arrive at what we're going to be talking about today, which is writing great dialogue for your story. Dialogue is very important. Not only does it move the story forward, but it helps to reveal things about your characters, both explicitly and implicitly. And then it also increases the tension in your story. The different emotions that come through as a character speaks are very important. In the workbook pages, they give an example of what would be considered a boring dialogue. And so just your characters greeting each other, talk about the same old thing, extremely boring. And this really is a filler. You wouldn't want to use something like this in your story. You want dialogue that creates tension, but also shows something or reveals something about your characters and their personalities. So part of your assignment today will be to create this tension increasing dialogue between two of your characters. It could be the protagonist and the antagonist. It could be between the protagonist and one of your supporting characters. Whatever it is, create something with meaning, something that really reveals something about your characters. And so when you work on this, make sure you work on it in Notability so that you can turn it and be able to write the dialogue boxes. Which brings us to your assignment today. So first of all, you had a bell ringer. Make sure you go in there and take that. Second, you're going to be working on those workbook pages 40 through 47 for writing great dialogue. Again, put it in Notability to work on it, and then submit your work to the assignment post in Google Classroom. Also, you have that bonus video in there in Google Classroom. Check it out. Navigators, you already probably know what this is, and you already know about the earworm that you typically get when you watch this video. Explorers, enjoy. Don't tell anyone, but tomorrow's bell ringer might just be over dialogue. See you later.